What is up, YouTube? My name is Eben, and today on The Edge, we're going to talk about a card that has some relevance for Expanded and also for Modified coming up, and that card is Shadow Circle. Now, I know what you might be saying in your head, but this is an accepted card. People run it. Yeah, they do, in Dark decks, and that's mostly it. Now, for those of you who aren't acquainted with this card from XY, it's a Stadium card, and it just says each Pokemon that has any Dark energy attached to it, both yours and your opponent's, have no weakness. And yes, this card has been run. It's not it's not unheard of, and it's not exactly a tech choice. But then again, that kind of depends on how you look at it. Clearly, we want to put a Dark energy on something, and then make it have no weakness. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but you know, when you're running a Dark deck, it's the Stadium to run to get rid of other Stadiums, and occasionally protect you from rogue fighting decks or protect things like Yveltal from electrical attacks, but it's not really like a big deal. What makes this card a tech choice is using it in places that aren't just your knee-jerk reaction inclusion. For instance, remember that cards like Rainbow Energy, for example, can also give people the benefit of Shadow Circle, as this counts as a Dark energy, as well as every other energy type. Meaning that a Pokemon with Rainbow Energy attached to it will gain the full protection of Shadow Circle, meaning that Shadow Circle plus Rainbow Energy can give any Pokemon no weakness. But of course we could just use weakness policy in this regard, so we're looking for something a little bit more specific. Well, first of all, of course, we have to think about the obvious. It's still, it's not the techiest way to use it, but it's still valid, and that is protecting Yveltal EX and Darkrai EX. These cards, especially in the format where they now exist, which is Expanded, these cards have a little difficulty fitting in and keeping up. Largely because, number one, it's a speed thing, but also the weakness on Yveltal EX is somewhat unpleasant right now. Especially when things like Raichu are running around, threatening to just OHKO it with no remorse, and very little in terms of value on the revenge kill either. And Darkrai himself doesn't attack very quickly, and while his fighting weakness isn't a big deal in that format just yet, it's still something that, well, basically the rest of his deck has to be protected and has to be aggressive in order for him to have value. Yeah, you can Dark Patch him up, but once again, he's just not doing enough by himself. And Dark doesn't exploit a lot of weaknesses itself, so actually the Circle doesn't really have a lot of recoil for the deck. But one place we're not necessarily always considering is things like Seismitoad EX, for example, who pairs beautifully with Yveltal EX, because they both like double colorless energy, and Seismitoad doesn't really need water energies. Yeah, he can use them to Grenade Hammer, which is a good attack. If you ignore the fact that it hits for 2 of your Pokemon for recoil, but largely that doesn't matter, you're after the 130. But mainly, this card is known for its versatility and being able to play in other decks, and him supporting Dark energies is very easy, actually. And one of the problems for Seismitoad EX is that despite how powerful his effect still is, he has a punishing weakness, and a punishing retreat cost to boot. But combining him with Dark allows you to use Darkrai EX, who can use those Dark energies to give Seismitoad EX a free retreat, which could be very useful. But erasing his weakness can be very meaningful. Perhaps even more so than eradicating his retreat cost, as Vespiquen is very common. It's easy to build, it's very fast, and it's very powerful. And if Seismitoad doesn't get his lockup quickly, and sometimes even when he does, Vespiquen can be very problematic, as it's easy for it to one-hit KO Seismitoad, even without assistance from the rest of its deck. So pretty much disregarding what the rest of the build is, Vespiquen can easily threaten Seismitoad EX. And considering Vespiquen gets paired with Raichu, well, Dark decks definitely are going to need this kind of coverage and protection from Shadow Circle. But other decks are going to have problems with weakness too lately. Consider the Eevee-lutions, all of them with their various effects, allowing stage 1s to hit for many different attack types. In fact, the Golurk from the most recent set, Ancient Origins, can actually be a fighting, psychic, electric, fire, and water type simultaneously, hitting devastatingly for many common Pokemon's weaknesses. And speaking of Pokemon with weaknesses to Eevee-lutions, think about Aegislash-EX. He can easily support one random Dark energy or Rainbow energies, especially in decks like, say, Fairy that could even support him, but also in Metal. By running this, you can give him a little bit of defense against Pokemon like, say, Flareon boosted Vespiquen, when that Vespiquen gets, say, blacksmithed, as he could otherwise easily shoot through Aegislash due to its weakness. But with Metal Energy and a Shadow Circle out, that becomes a lot more difficult to do, as then they have to hit him for a natural 170 with their Bee Revenge, versus when Flareon is hitting him for weakness, they only have to hit for half the volume in order to knock out, which is basically just hitting for 90, so only 7 Pokemon have to be in the discard pile. A very easy knockout for Vespiquen to achieve, and getting Flareon out is easy too. Aegislash normally walls them, but Blacksmith is a common build now, and it's something you have to be aware of, but it's something which Shadow Circle can easily stop, especially when you consider that one of Vespiquen's their stadium, one of their primary ways of dealing with Shadow Circle, is something they tend to discard quickly and don't run many copies of, as they rarely need it past the first turn or two. So if you play a Shadow Circle on the second, third, or, well, turns beyond that, it's often liable to stay for the rest of the game or only get replaced once, meaning that you can make your Aegislash much harder for your opponent to deal with. They can hit him hard, but without weakness, they may only deal, say, 120 or 130. You can KO back with Slash Blast easily, and they're going to have a harder time getting a second Vespiquen up with another Blacksmith. Of course, there are other things that can see support too. Double Dragon Energy can help Mega Rayquaza, but Mega Rayquaza doesn't want some random fairy deck coming through and cleaning its clock. After all, with a fairy weakness, it only takes 120 damage to knock out your Mega Rayquaza EX, meaning a Florges EX can easily do it with only 2 energy, which is a very small investment to take out what's essentially your biggest punisher. And Dragon decks need a stadium, but aren't terribly picky about what stadium they have to have necessarily, so Shadow Circle is an easy inclusion for them, and it can also protect Pokemon like Hydreigon EX just as well. So anyway, here we are, taking a look at some extra and more techie uses for Shadow Circle, and until next time, like, comment, subscribe, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already, link is below, and I will see you next time.